Hi, this is PubShorts episode 14 with a little help from AI. My name is Dr. KK. I'm the Innovation Officer at Trinca and Inago, and I have with me Tony. Hi, Tony.
Hi, Keika, how you doing? I'm Tony O'Rourke, and I'm head of partnerships here at Inago. And I appreciate the fact we've got a Beatles reference this week, which is good.
Is Beatles one of your favorite bands, Tony?
No, they're not, but I do appreciate their music. But yeah, I'm one of those people that thinks that maybe they're given a bit too much credit. But who am I? I'm not a musician, so I speak, and I'm sure they're very, very important.
Okay, so this episode is episode 14. It is titled "With a Little Help from AI." Based on the obviously the obvious song with a little help from my friends by the Beatles, and we are talking a lot of AI articles. So let me jump to the first article directly. So, Tony, we have a Nature News article which is titled AI's Computing Gap, Academics Lack Access to Powerful Chips Needed for Research. So, I'll just summarize a couple of main points. So, this new research reveals a troubling gap that most academic researchers, Tony, cannot afford the expensive computing power needed to train advanced AI models, unlike their industry counterparts. Whereas big tech companies can easily access powerful computers and GPUs, and whereas universities often struggle with limited resources and long wait times, creating an uneven playing field in AI research.
Yeah.
Is
Uh, yeah, it's a real shame. There seems to be this imbalance between corporate and the academic world. You think about the number of really important inventions that have come out of academia over the last 50 years. MRI was from a university. Pacemakers came out of university research. There's all sorts of hundreds of thousands of examples because they were able to use the latest technology.
Yes, but having said that, there is hope. As per the article, researchers have found creative ways to train AI models using fewer resources by extending computation time and making it more feasible for academics. So, now why does the divide matter? Because academic research free from commercial pressure often leads to unique innovations that benefit the society. Agree, Tony?
As
Yeah,
we said, MRIs wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for university researchers.
right, right, right. All right, so moving on to the next story, quick story. This is a dense.
But before you move on, I will also say
Yeah,
I suspect AI is going to be like the silicon chip,
right.
in that at the very beginning it was unaffordable, but now it's an everyday item.
Okay.
Those costs will come down.
A very pertinent point, I would agree. Moving on to the next topic, this is an archive paper which is titled CycleResearcher Improving Automated Research via Automated Review. So, before we go ahead, Tony, this is yet another paper from the field of machine learning and computational science
Yeah, yeah.
that says that AI can do a lot, and we've already talked about it, that we need evidence from other fields. But let me just quickly tell you the highlights. So, new AI systems can potentially conduct the entire research project independently, from writing papers to peer reviewing them. So the two tools that I mentioned in this article are CycleResearcher and CycleReviewer. So they can generate research papers that score nearly as high as human written academic manuscripts. Tony, what do you think so far?
You listen, I appreciate the fact that there is a very broad spectrum here. And then at one end of the spectrum, you're going to have an audience saying, look, there is no role. And then you're going to have computational scientists like the people who wrote this paper who are saying, look, there absolutely is a role.
Right.
And we think there are examples. I think, I'm still very much of the belief that we're not there yet. There is still a very, very strong requirement for human intervention.
Yeah, but Tony, in tests, the AI outperformed human reviewers in predicting research paper quality, suggesting a
Well,
potentially transformative approach to
Well,
scientific
yeah, but then
management.
again, it was in research based on computational science, on a particular area of computational science.
Yes.
I wonder what I mean. I don't know. They may have looked at this. What would the results have looked like if they took humanities papers or some literary papers or some social science papers? Would they have got the same results?
And in general, you've been around the block, Tony. How
Thank you.
comfortable, how comfortable are you with AI conducting this entire sort of cyclical research process?
Oh, at the moment, not at all. But I appreciate the fact that you've got to have people who are working on the frontiers, who are testing and experimenting, because it may change as we move forward. But at the moment, there is absolutely still a strong requirement for human intervention,
Yes, and that's
in
why.
my opinion.
Yes, and that is why we need guidelines, which is a segue to our next paper, which is
Absolutely, yeah,
it's a
yeah.
comment I think published in Nature, if I'm not mistaken. It is titled Guidelines for Ethical Use and Acknowledgement of Large Language Models in Academic Writing. So this commentary published in Nature proposes 3 criteria for ethical framework, which is human vetting and guaranteeing, ensuring substantial human contribution, and acknowledgements and transparency. Tony, that sounds like exactly what we were just talking about, right? In terms
Yeah.
of,
I mean, and this paper makes a very interesting point that the guidelines as they exist at the moment perhaps aren't fit for purpose, or at least they need to be adjusted, because all the author has to do is say they used a Gen AI tool, an LLM, whatever, to write this paper, but it didn't say how much of the paper or which sections of the paper they wrote the LLM with. It could be that they wrote the entire paper with an LLM, but we're not asking to specify. So I think having guidelines, having some rules, will provide greater clarity and transparency.
Yeah, as highlighted here, substantial human contribution includes a need to recognize and attribute prompt engineering and fine-tuning, and aligning human contributions with ICMJ's standard, which is very important, and that has been a gold standard in terms of acknowledging the contributions. And transparency standards can vary according to the field and task detailed. So that's another aspect. It is clearly mentioning that different fields, we just talked about machine learning and computer science, requiring different standards. So that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it may be there are certain research areas where it's perfectly acceptable for the AI to generate, because it's very, very heavy, very dense data, lots of numerical analysis. But there still has to be an acknowledgement of how it's used.
Right, and the most interesting thing for me was this acknowledgement sort of template, and I won't read it out, but basically this is a template that the paper recommends that each, let's say, LLM contribution containing paper should have, which is like an authorship contribution statement, and I'm happy that at least there is this, that starting point of getting this right in terms of acknowledging a large model contribution.
I mean, I'd probably go a step further and say that, not just acknowledging the use, but actually where it was used.
Yes.
Some kind of say in the methodology or in the conclusion or in the discussion, we used an LLM, whereas in other areas we didn't. I think that might give even more clarity and transparency.
Yeah, so maybe this is a starting point, more details.
Yeah, I think it's really, really important to have these starting points.
Right. So moving on to the next paper, if I'm not mistaken. So this is an Elsevier paper, which is titled "The Great AI Witch Hunt: Reviewers' Perception and Misconception of Generative AI in Research Writing." So interestingly, I'm reading Nexus by Yuval Noah Harari, which is about let's say information networks and how human society has evolved, and there's a lot of talk about the witch hunts in Europe in, I think, about maybe 10,000 years or so ago. So this is interesting from that context. So I'll just quickly highlight the key findings. So this is a study involving peer reviewers, researchers, and experts, and these experts struggle to detect AI generated text, suggesting that these tools can seamlessly enhance writing quality. Basically, they are talking about peer-reviewed manuscripts, and reviewers, human experts, failed to detect AI-generated text. The involvement did not impact reviewers' assessments of research credibility or accuracy. The science does still speak for itself. Tony, your thoughts?
It doesn't sway my opinion of the use of Gen AI. I think we go back to the earlier paper. I mean, Gen AI is here. The ChatGPT and other tools are here to stay. They're not going to go away. So we just need to have structured, formal methods to be able to acknowledge how they're being used.
Yeah, so the one key takeaway for me would be that AI can be helpful as a writing assistant, and you really have to evaluate the science and the content of the paper. But transparency is important, and intellectual control is important. Who is contributing what? Human is doing what? That is exactly what we talked about in the previous statement.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Right. And moving on to the last, I think, AI.
But just to correct you, by the way, the witch hunts in Europe weren't 1,000 years ago. They may have happened 1,000 years ago, but they were really, really prevalent in the 16th and 17th century, and they transferred over to the US as well.
Right.
So 500 years ago.
500 years ago. Thank you for the history lesson, as always.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome.
All right. So this is a Springer Nature article from the Journal of Academic Ethics. It is titled "When Using Artificial Intelligence Tools in Scientific Publications, Authors Should Include Prompts and the generated text as part of a submission. So I'll just let you comment on the title itself, Tony. So what do you think?
My first thoughts when I read this was, who better to comment on the use of prompts than somebody who writes in these prompts all the time. KK, what do you think?
I think it is very essential that the prompts, because I record my own prompts. When if I'm doing something on a large language model, it is very difficult to replicate it because of the inherent nature of generative AI. So I always record the prompt because I never know what little tweaks that I make could result in a very good result or a very poor result. So
why is it important in terms of the prompt itself and measuring the outcome?
So replicability, science is founded on the fact that whatever methodology that has been stated in a research paper needs to be replicated and to be proven that it is right. So from that point of view, you have to state which model, what prompt, etc. So quickly summarizing. So journals are struggling to, evaluate how to handle AI writing assistance. Current policies allow authors to simply mention AI use without detailing exactly. This is your point only a couple of articles ago.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The proposed solution, authors should now submit their actual AI prompts, which I agree with, raw AI outputs, and a clear trail of how they edited AI generated text. Now, there are some grammar editing tools already that create a sort of a version record or a track record as to what has happened, which is the portion that has been created by AI. But you know what, Tony, when I read this, I am already aware that the supplementary content is getting bigger and bigger as and when we go, and it'll eventually, if you add all this information, it will make the reader's job a lot more difficult. That's my only concern. I would like your thoughts on this.
Well, I suppose it kind of reinforces the importance of a well-written summary, a well-written research article. And if the user then needs to drill down into the data or into the ancillary material, they should have the option to do so in order to try and replicate that experiment or that particular finding. So I think, unfortunately, it's a fact of life. A lot of research is becoming increasingly computational, and therefore there's going to be more data coming with it.
Interestingly, AI can be used for summarization as well. So I think it's both sides. You increase one side of lots of data and then use AI to summarize.
And we've spoken about this before. I mean, I think there is a role for good, clear, well-guided summaries written by AI.
Yeah, so AI generated summaries can really improve the reach and the impact of research, and publishers should really consider creating such AI generated summaries to propagate research. I mean, I would love to have my colleagues, in the sense my medical colleagues' research to be read more widely by my friends and family, because if they had accessible lay summaries, then maybe they would interact with the research more often, and there'll be less conspiracy theory mongers and everything. So I would obviously go for that.
I mean, interesting. One of the interesting side effects of this is that we have publishers currently talking to us about our services regarding sort of lay summaries and plain language summaries, and not just creating an English master or a master version in English, but then how we can then take that content and translate it into various languages. So the user can say, okay, give me a user summary in Urdu, give me a user summary in Hindi, and it's there.
Excellent. I mean, I'm excited about all these developments. I mean, science has to reach the masses, and it has to affect policy. That's a reason why scientists and researchers do their job. And moving on to Tony, the last main article that we are covering. This is a very sort of wordy article. I'll try to read the title. This is I think an open access paper. So I'm just thinking it's published in openreview.net. So MAMORX, I think, multi-agent, multimodal scientific review generation with external knowledge. So as you would have imagined, this is a dense paper. So this is an AI system that aims to mimic human review process of a manuscript. It shows a high success rate. It's similar to the other paper that we just covered. Humans evaluate, when Tony, you and I, or any other reviewer, when you evaluate any piece of content, you are using a multimodal approach actually, and you're looking at different aspects. You will, if there is an audio summary of it, you probably will also interact with it, apart from obviously the text. So this system, MAMORX, main features include multi-agent systems and multimodal foundation models and external resources. The only caveat is that the evaluated papers are from the field of NLP and machine learning. That's the same thing that we say, because every this sort of an article in terms of AI-based review is coming from the fields of natural language processing, etc. So Tony, multimodal AI, as I've told you, is here to stay. I think in the past episodes, even for peer review. But should the source items for peer review shouldn't the source items for peer review be multimodal? I mean, currently we are limited in terms of text and imagery and maybe the occasional video, right? So for multimodal AI to work, it needs all sorts of input. So what are your thoughts on this?
Oh, I mean, there is an increasing trend, particularly in scientific journals and textbooks, to produce things like, we talked about plain language summaries, but things like graphical abstracts or video summaries or infographics or sort of interactable infographics. So if AI, these multimodal AI tools are going to be used, then they need to be able to deal with those different forms of media.
All right, so we are down to our quick hits. So the first quick hit is that the news article, SSP has launched the inaugural EPIC Awards to recognize excellence in scholarly publishing, technology, and communication. So the interesting point that I noted here is that there is special recognition for student-led contributions, and it is open to both SSP members and non-members. So that's interesting, isn't it? It would probably encourage students to... what are the big awards that you're aware of, Tony, in the field of scholarly publishing? We've talked about Nobel Prize and everything.
Well, I've got obviously Nobel in scholarly publishing within the scholarly world, I should say. In scholarly publishing, organisations like ALPSP, the Association of Learned and Professional Society Publishers, have had, or scholarly publishers have had, an award ceremony for the last 10 plus years, and they recognize an excellence in scholarly publishing. And maybe SSP coming into it a little bit later on from a different angle, right. But this is a big organization, an important organization, and one that people follow very closely. So I think anything they recognize as excellence has got to be applauded.
Yeah, and if somebody is watching and if they want to submit it, the submission period is from the 1st of December 2024 until the 15th of January 2025.
Yeah.
So if somebody is applying, all the best. And I'm moving on to the last story. This is a news story from India-related news story, Tony. So it's titled, the Indian government plans centralized subscriptions for top academic journals. So obviously it's self-explanatory, but this plan or this policy is called One Nation, One Subscription policy. It's ONOS. And it is scheduled to be implemented in a phased manner, with phase 1 in between 2025 and 2027. And institutions are requested to not renew their existing individual and consortia-based licenses, instead use the national licenses. So, Tony, is from an Indian researcher point of view, because I've studied here and I've struggled with getting access to these expensive papers behind the paywall. This is probably a good thing, but you are a world-traveled, multi-experienced guy. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, so for background, I've worked for academic publishers for most of my career. And I spent 15 years working with the subscription licensing field for academic journals. So between 2000 and 2015, my teams were involved very closely in some of these very early national license agreements. And India, there's a recognition in India. It's almost like a two-tier system. You have the top institutions in India, the government research labs, and some of the very, very high elite institutions that are well funded and have almost Western level resources available to them. And then you've got the vast majority of institutions of higher education, of which are thousands, that really don't have any funding available. So the government was desperate to try and extend the sort of benefits of these services to every possible academic researcher in the country. And it's a big market, as you know, but it's also a market that really was unable to fund a lot of the content that they needed. So well done to the Indian government for taking this route. I mean, I'd be interested, 236 million, I think it is, sounds like a lot of money, but I don't know how much is being spent in total on academic content in India. It's possible that it might be less than what's actually being spent at the moment. I don't know.
And I'm going to ask you, the world is probably going the opposite way. Open science, open access, whereas India is going this way. Is that a matter of concern for you?
No. What we don't know here is kind of what the models are going to be. The world is going open science, but what a lot of the world is doing is switching from pay to access models to pay to publish and read models. So and if I would imagine, and I don't know this with any evidence, but I would imagine if the Indian government does this right, those deals will become transformative agreements and become read and access, i.e. open access policies, where everyone can not only submit, but they can read, but they can also submit papers as well without having to pay an APC. I don't know the details of these deals, but it strikes me as a natural next step.
Right. We will see how things evolve, and that brings
interesting.
This brings us,
and then they're not the only country to do this. I mean, you look at places like Canada, Finland. There are other countries as well that have been doing this.
Yeah, but that brings us probably to our shortest PubShorts episode, where we covered a lot of stories, but interestingly. So Tony, if somebody is interested in knowing more about PubShorts, Trinka, Inago, Tony, or KK, how can they do it?
Well, they can find PubShorts on YouTube and just search PubShorts Inago, and you'll find the links to the first 14 episodes, including this one. I can't believe it's 14 already. You can find KK or me on LinkedIn. Just search for Tony O'Rourke or KK on LinkedIn. And KK, I know, is all over various other social media channels as well. Or you can write to me directly at tonio@inago.com, and we look forward to your suggestions and ideas.
Right. And without attempting to sound like a millennial, if you find us on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell icon and share the content with your friends. So that
please do.
Yeah, when we have a next live stream or a next content piece, maybe you can get it faster. And Tony, we have to acknowledge that tomorrow is the big Thanksgiving, and I don't know, on behalf
in the US.
Yeah, so I was thinking, I was trying to phrase it. So everybody on the other side of the Atlantic, above the Gulf of Mexico and below the Great Lakes of America, we wish you on behalf of Inago and Charlesworth a very happy Thanksgiving. Tony, anything? Do you have anything to say?
No. Happy Thanksgiving to my friends in the US.
All right, great. So that brings us to the end of PubShorts episode 14 with a little help from AI. And until the next time, this is on behalf of everybody who helps Tony and me to bring such content. This is Dr. KK signing off for PubShorts. We'll see you in the next one. Bye, Tony.